Tom was a man who valued peace. He had worked for years in construction and recently slowed down his schedule to enjoy a quieter life. His home was not the biggest on the street, but it was neat and well kept. The driveway was always clean, the grass was trimmed, and the garage was filled with tools he had collected over the years. Among those tools and machines stood his pride, a bright red ATV. He had bought it after saving for months, and it was more than just a vehicle for him. Every time he looked at it, he remembered the hard work that made it possible. In Tom's neighborhood, most people respected one another. Neighbors greeted each other, shared small talk on the weekends, and rarely created trouble. Life there was slow and calm, just the way Tom liked it. But things began to change one summer morning, when a moving truck pulled up to the house across the street. A new family was moving in. The mother's name was Linda. From the very first day, she made herself noticed. She spoke in a loud, commanding voice, as if she expected everyone to follow her rules. She gave orders to the movers, telling them where every piece of furniture should go, and complained when they did not move fast enough. Tom, standing in his yard, watched with quiet curiosity. He had seen many new neighbors come and go, but something about Linda was different. She had the energy of someone who wanted to control everything around her. Along with Linda came her daughter, Mia. She was 19, with expensive clothes and a phone always in her hand. While the movers worked, she scrolled through her phone, laughed at messages, and took pictures of herself in front of the new house. She did not help carry anything inside. She only gave commands to others in a careless tone, much like her mother. That first day told Tom enough. He realized that life on the street might not stay as peaceful as it once was. Still, he hoped they would settle in quietly. He kept his distance, nodded politely when Linda introduced herself, and returned to his garage. But Linda was not the kind of person to stay quiet. Within a week, she was knocking on doors, introducing herself not just as a neighbor, but as the new voice of the street. She spoke of rules, appearances, and order. She mentioned that she was now part of the homeowners association and said she planned to make changes. Most neighbors listened politely and shut their doors. Tom tried to remain calm, though he felt a small knot forming in his chest. The first real conflict started with his ATV. Linda saw it parked in Tom's driveway one evening as she walked her dog. She stopped, stared at it for a while, and then crossed the street. Tom was cleaning tools in his garage when he heard her footsteps. "You know," Linda said in her sharp voice, "that thing really doesn't belong in the driveway. It ruins the look of the street. We are going to have higher standards now." Tom straightened and wiped his hands. He kept his tone polite but firm. "That is my driveway. My ATV is not hurting anyone. I keep it clean and safe." "I don't see a problem." Linda crossed her arms. "Well, as part of the HOA, I will have to bring this up. You should consider keeping it in the garage." Tom did not want to argue, so he only nodded and turned back to his work. He thought that would be the end of it. But Linda was not someone who gave up easily. Over the next few days, she made comments whenever she passed by. She told other neighbors that Tom's ATV was an eyesore. She said it made the street look less respectable. Mia, on the other hand, reacted differently. She did not complain. Instead, she stared at the ATV with interest. Each time she walked by, her eyes lingered on it. She even told her friends who visited often that she wanted one just like it. Tom sometimes overheard her bragging. One Saturday, Tom was working in the garage again when Mia strolled up the driveway. She looked at the ATV closely, her eyes shining with excitement. "This is nice," she said casually. "How fast does it go?" Tom was careful with his words. "It's fast enough. I use it on trails outside the city." "It is not a toy," Mia smiled. "I could ride this better than anyone. Maybe you should let me try sometime." Tom shook his head. "Sorry, it's not for lending. It is valuable and dangerous if you are not trained." Mia rolled her eyes and laughed as if he had told a joke. "I'll get one soon anyway. My mom gets me whatever I want." That sentence stayed in Tom's mind long after she left. He knew Mia was spoiled, but he did not think she would dare to take what was not hers. Still, something about her careless words made him uneasy. The following days showed more of Linda's controlling nature. She tried to tell neighbors where to place their trash bins, how to cut their grass, and even what color flowers looked best in the front yard. Some laughed behind her back, calling her Karen. Others grew frustrated but avoided open conflict. Tom tried his best to ignore her, focusing on his work and his hobbies. He took his ATV out on weekends, enjoying the freedom of riding away from the busy city. Each ride felt like a reward for staying patient with the new neighbors, but patience has limits. One evening, after returning from a ride, Tom noticed Mia standing with a group of friends near his driveway. They were whispering, pointing at the ATV and laughing. When Tom approached, the group scattered, but Mia stayed behind with a smug look on her face. "You know," she said boldly, "I could take this out and everyone would be jealous. I'd look amazing on it." Tom gave her a firm look. "It is not yours. Stay away from it." She shrugged and walked away, humming to herself. That night, Tom locked his garage carefully. Something in Mia's tone had unsettled him. He told himself he might be overthinking, but deep down he sensed trouble. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. He stepped outside to water his plants and was shocked. His ATV was gone. For a moment, he thought it was a bad dream. He rushed to the garage, but it was empty. His heart raced. He looked down the street, and there in the distance, he saw a small group of young people. Mia was at the center, sitting proudly on his red ATV. She was laughing as her friends cheered. Tom's peaceful life had just been shattered. Tom stood frozen at the edge of his driveway, staring at the scene in the distance. His heart pounded as if he had just run a long race. The bright red ATV that he had worked so hard to buy was now under the careless control of Mia. She revved, the engine loudly, laughing while her friends clapped and shouted. Dust rose behind her as she spun the wheels in circles on the street. For Tom, it felt unreal. He could not believe his neighbor's daughter had the courage to take something that did not belong to her. His hands clenched at his sides as he walked quickly down the street toward the group. The teenagers noticed him coming and began to whisper, but Mia remained seated on the ATV, smirking with confidence. "Get off my ATV right now," Tom said firmly as he reached her. His voice carried the weight of anger and disbelief. Mia tilted her head and replied with a mocking tone, "Relax, I'm just having fun. It's not like you're using it right now." "This is not a toy," Tom said, his patience thinning. "It belongs to me. You had no right to take it." Her friends looked uneasy. Some of them stepped back, clearly not wanting to be part of the confrontation. But Mia crossed her arms and leaned forward on the handlebars. "You don't have to act so serious. I'll bring it back in one piece. Besides, my mom says people like you can't tell me what to do." Those words hit Tom harder than the theft itself. People like you. He wondered what Linda had been telling her daughter. Before he could reply, Mia twisted the handle and sped down the street, leaving Tom standing in a cloud of dust. The roar of the engine echoed through the neighborhood. Dogs barked. Windows opened and neighbors peeked out to see what was happening. Tom could feel dozens of eyes on him, but all he could focus on was the sound of his ATV getting further away. He pulled out his phone and called the police. His voice was steady, but inside he felt a storm. He explained the situation clearly, giving the description of the vehicle and the girl who had taken it. The officer on the other end assured him that a patrol would be sent immediately. As Tom ended the call, he saw Linda marching down the sidewalk. She looked furious, not at her daughter, but at him. "How dare you speak to my daughter like that?" she shouted before even reaching him. "She is just a kid having fun. You should be ashamed of yourself for making such a scene." Tom's eyes widened. "She stole my ATV. Do you not understand that?" Linda waved her hand dismissively. "Borrowed, she borrowed it. You should be thankful she finds it interesting. Most people don't even look at your machines." Tom took a deep breath, trying not to lose control. "This is theft, Linda. I've already called the police." Her face twisted in shock and anger. "You did what?" "Oh, you are going to regret that. Do you know who I am? Do you know how many people in the HOA listen to me? I will make sure your life here is very difficult." Tom stood his ground. "This is not about the HOA. This is about right and wrong. Your daughter has crossed a line." Before Linda could answer, the sound of the ATV engine returned. Mia came back down the street at full speed. She pulled up beside her mother and parked, looking proud of herself. Her hair was messy from the wind, and her cheeks were red. But she looked like someone who thought she had just won a competition. "See?" Mia said, smiling. "I told you I'd bring it back. No harm done." The neighbors gathered around, whispering among themselves. Some shook their heads in disapproval. A few even pulled out their phones, recording the scene. Tom knew this was more than a private conflict now. Within minutes, a police car rolled into the street. The flashing lights drew even more attention. 2 officers stepped out, one male and one female. They walked directly toward Tom, who quickly explained the situation. Linda interrupted several times, raising her voice and insisting it was a misunderstanding, but the officers stayed calm and professional. "Ma'am," the female officer said firmly, turning to Mia, "did you take this ATV without permission?" Mia shrugged. "I was just borrowing it. It's not a big deal. Everyone knows me here. I can ride what I want." "That is not how the law works," the officer replied. "You cannot take someone else's property without their permission." Linda stepped forward, waving her arms. "You don't need to talk to her like that. We are respected people here. My daughter is untouchable. She will not be treated like a criminal for something so small." The male officer raised his hand. "Ma'am, please calm down. No one is above the law. We need to ask your daughter some questions." Mia rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath. Her attitude showed no fear, no understanding of the seriousness of the situation. Tom watched silently, feeling both angry and sad. He had hoped the new neighbors would bring fresh energy to the street, but instead they had brought chaos. The officers took statements from both sides. Tom explained that the ATV was locked in his garage the night before and was missing in the morning. Linda tried to argue that the garage door must have been left open, but Tom insisted it was secured. The truth was clear. Mia had trespassed and taken what was not hers. After some time, the officers decided to issue a warning. They explained that if the ATV had been damaged, if Mia had left the neighborhood, or if Tom wished to press charges, the situation could become much more serious. For now, they wrote an official report and gave Mia a stern lecture. Linda was furious. She accused Tom of exaggerating, of trying to embarrass her family in front of the neighbors. She promised that the HOA would hear about this and that Tom would regret his decision. When the officers left, Tom pushed the ATV back into his garage and locked it again. His hands shook slightly, not from fear but from frustration. He had never wanted conflict, yet now he found himself in the center of neighborhood drama. That evening, he sat on his porch, watching the sunset. Several neighbors walked by and quietly offered him support. One man patted his shoulder and said, "You did the right thing. She needs to learn." Another woman whispered, "Don't let Linda scare you. Most of us are on your side." Their words gave Tom some comfort, but he knew this was only the beginning. Linda and Mia were not the type to let things go. They believed rules did not apply to them, and sooner or later, they would try something again. Inside the house across the street, Linda was pacing back and forth, speaking on the phone in an angry tone. Mia sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, still smirking as if nothing had happened. She posted a picture of herself on the ATV earlier, captioned with words about being unstoppable. Her friends cheered her in the comments, feeding her belief that she could get away with anything. Tom did not see the post, but he felt the tension in the air. He knew he had to be ready. He could not let his guard down again. The ATV was more than a machine now. It was a symbol of his stand against arrogance and disrespect. As night fell, the street grew quiet. But beneath the calm surface, a battle of pride and principles was beginning to grow. Tom had chosen to defend what was his, and Linda had chosen to protect her daughter's reckless behavior. The conflict between them was far from over, and deep. Inside, Tom had a feeling that the next chapter of this fight would be even more difficult. The morning after the police incident, Tom woke up early. He stepped onto his porch with a cup of coffee, hoping the cool air would clear his thoughts. The red ATV sat safely inside his garage, locked and secure, but the memory of Mia's smug smile still lingered in his mind. He replayed her words, "My mom says I can do what I want," over and over. Those words carried no respect for boundaries, no respect for others. The neighborhood seemed unusually quiet that morning. A few neighbors walked their dogs. Some waved at Tom politely, but there was a certain heaviness in the air. Everyone had seen what happened the day before. The flashing police lights had drawn attention, and people had whispered late into the night. The once peaceful street now carried tension, and Tom knew he was at the center of it. Later that afternoon, as Tom trimmed his front yard, Linda marched across the street. She wore sunglasses and carried a clipboard in her hand. Her steps were sharp, her expression full of determination. Tom sighed, already knowing this would not be a friendly visit. "Tom," she said with an authoritative tone, "I need to discuss some new HOA guidelines. It's about your driveway, your garage, and that machine of yours." Tom straightened and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Linda, if this is about the ATV again, we already spoke. It stays where it is. It's my property." Linda flipped through the papers on her clipboard. "I have decided with my influence in the HOA that vehicles like that should not be parked in driveways at all. They lower the value of homes around here. As the leader of the street committee, I will enforce this rule." Tom could hardly believe what he was hearing. "You cannot just create new rules because of me. That is not how the HOA works. And besides, most of the neighbors support me." Linda smirked. "Support? They are only being polite. People here care about appearances, and I care about order. If you don't follow the new rule, I will fine you. I will also make sure your complaints go unheard in the future." Tom took a step closer, his voice steady but firm. "Linda, your daughter stole my ATV. The police made a report. Instead of worrying about rules, you should be teaching her about respect. Do you not see how serious this is?" For the first time, Linda's expression faltered. A flicker of discomfort crossed her face, but it quickly disappeared as she raised her chin. "My daughter's fine. She did nothing wrong. You are overreacting, Tom. She is untouchable, and I will not let anyone treat her like a criminal." Without another word, she turned and stormed back to her house, leaving Tom standing in disbelief. That evening, a group of neighbors gathered near Tom's driveway. They wanted to talk about what had happened. One neighbor, an older man named Mark, spoke first. "Tom, don't let her scare you. She's been trying to control everyone since the day she moved in. We all saw what Mia did. We all know it was wrong." A woman named Rose nodded. "She thinks the HOA gives her power, but it doesn't. We should all stand together. If she tries to fine you, we can fight it." Their support gave Tom some comfort, but deep down he worried. Linda's stubbornness and Mia's arrogance were a dangerous mix. If they could ignore the law once, they might do it again. Days passed and things grew worse. Mia began driving by Tom's house more often. She and her friends would laugh loudly, pointing at his garage. Sometimes she shouted comments like, "Still hiding your toy?" Or, "You should thank me for giving it attention." Her words were meant to annoy, and they did. One evening, Tom returned home from grocery shopping to find something disturbing. His garage door had fresh scratches near the lock. It looked like someone had tried to force it open. Panic filled him as he rushed inside. The ATV was still there, but the marks told a clear story. Someone had attempted to steal it again. He immediately called the police. The officer who arrived inspected the lock and agreed it looked like a break-in attempt. "Do you suspect anyone?" the officer asked. Tom hesitated. He did not want to accuse without proof, but the answer was obvious. "Mia," he finally said. "She has already stolen it once. She wants it." The officer wrote everything down, promising to keep an eye on the area. Before leaving, he gave Tom advice. Install a camera. It will help if something like this happens again. That night, Tom set up security cameras around his garage and driveway. The red light of the lens blinked quietly, watching over the ATV like a silent guard. Meanwhile, across the street, Linda and Mia sat in their living room. Linda was furious that Tom had called the police again. "He is trying to destroy us," she told her daughter. "He is painting you as a thief. We cannot let him win," Mia smirked. "Don't worry, Mom, nobody can touch me. Even if he has cameras, I'll be careful. He can't stop me." Her confidence only grew when her friends encouraged her online. They called her bold, brave, and fearless. Every comment fueled her arrogance. She began planning her next move, convinced that rules were for other people, not for her. The tension reached its peak one weekend. Tom was out mowing his lawn when he heard laughter coming from down the street. He looked up and saw Mia again, this time riding a small dirt bike with her friends. She rode dangerously close to his driveway, kicking up dust and leaving tire marks on the edge of his grass. Tom shouted, "Stay off my property." Mia only laughed louder, circling around before speeding away. Her friends followed, their engines roaring. The neighbors had had enough. Mark and Rose walked over to Tom, shaking their heads. "This cannot go on," Rose said firmly. "She is reckless. Someone is going to get hurt. You need to press charges, Tom. It is the only way she will learn." Tom nodded slowly. He had been patient for too long. Mia had crossed every line. The next time she tried something, he would take action. The chance came sooner than expected. Late one night, the security camera caught movement. A figure crept toward Tom's garage dressed in dark clothing. The person fumbled with the lock, trying to force it open. The camera recorded everything clearly. When the porch light suddenly turned on, the figure looked up. It was Mia. Tom immediately called the police. By the time they arrived, Mia was back inside her house pretending to be asleep. But the officers had already seen the footage. They knocked on Linda's door, showing her the recording. Linda tried to argue, tried to claim it was fake, but the evidence was undeniable. The officers warned her that if Mia was caught again, she would be arrested. Tom watched from his porch as the confrontation unfolded. Linda shouted angrily at the officers while Mia stood behind her, arms crossed and face full of defiance. Even with proof, she refused to admit she had done wrong. That night, Tom realized something important. This was no longer just about an ATV. It was about principle. It was about showing that no one, no matter how spoiled or arrogant, was above the law. The battle was not over yet. In fact, it was only beginning. After the security camera incident, Tom believed things might calm down. The police had warned Linda and Mia clearly. There was no longer any space for misunderstanding. Everyone in the neighborhood had seen the proof, and the officers had told Mia directly that another mistake would lead to arrest. But peace did not come. Instead, Linda's anger grew stronger. She felt humiliated that police officers had shown up at her door with evidence against her daughter. To her, it was not about right or wrong anymore. It was about pride. She could not stand the thought that Tom had won in front of the neighbors. She started walking around the neighborhood more often, carrying her clipboard, making notes on people's lawns, fences, and cars. When she passed Tom's house, she always slowed down, glaring at him if he was outside. Sometimes she muttered things under her breath. Other times she made comments loud enough for him to hear. This street used to look nice until certain people lowered the standard. The neighbors noticed her bitterness. Many of them tried to avoid her, not wanting to be caught in her arguments. Some openly supported Tom now, waving at him or stopping by to talk. They wanted him to know he was not alone. Mia, on the other hand, acted as if nothing had happened. She still bragged to her friends about the stolen ride, pretending it had been just a funny adventure. She told everyone that Tom was overreacting and that the police had only given her a warning because they were jealous of her freedom. Her arrogance did not fade. In fact, it seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. One Friday evening, Tom returned home from work to find his mailbox stuffed with HOA notices. He opened them and saw ridiculous complaints. One said his grass was too long, even though it was perfectly trimmed. Another said his trash can was out of place, though it was at the curb on collection day like everyone else's. The final letter stated he had violated HOA rules by keeping unapproved vehicles in his driveway. Tom shook his head, knowing exactly who was behind it. Linda was trying to use the HOA to pressure him. He gathered the letters and walked over to his neighbor Mark's house. Mark was not only a friend but also one of the original members of the HOA committee. When Tom showed him the letters, Mark frowned. "This is nonsense. Your lawn is fine, your trash can is fine, and that ATV is not against any rule. Linda is abusing her position. Can she actually fine me?" Tom asked. Mark shook his head. "Not without the committee's vote. And I can tell you now, most of us are tired of her. She doesn't have as much power as she thinks." That gave Tom relief, but he also knew Linda would not stop. She wanted a fight, and Mia was ready to help her. The turning point came the next weekend. Tom had planned a short trip to the trails with his ATV. He packed his gear, loaded water and tools, and rolled the ATV out of the garage. But as he checked the tires, he noticed something alarming. Both rear tires were slashed. A sharp object had cut them cleanly, leaving them flat. His chest tightened. He crouched down and ran his hand over the cuts. There was no doubt. This was intentional. Someone had sabotaged his ATV. Tom immediately reviewed the camera footage. His suspicion was confirmed. Around midnight the night before, the cameras had recorded Mia sneaking across the street with a knife in her hand. She crouched by the ATV, stabbed the tires quickly, then ran back to her house. This time there was no room for warnings. Tom called the police again. When the officers arrived and saw the footage, their expressions grew serious. "This is criminal damage to property," one officer explained. This goes beyond a prank. We'll have to take action." They walked across the street and knocked firmly on Linda's door. Within moments, shouting could be heard. Linda argued, claiming the footage was fake, insisting her daughter had been asleep. The officers remained calm, pointing out that the video was clear. Finally, they told Linda directly, "If Mia does not come with us for questioning, we will have to escalate this." Neighbors began gathering outside again. Lights turned on, doors opened, and whispers spread. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Tom stood near his porch, his arms crossed tightly, watching as the drama unfolded. Mia appeared at the door looking annoyed rather than scared. She rolled her eyes and muttered, "This is ridiculous. You can't arrest me. I didn't do anything." The officers asked her to step outside. Linda clutched her daughter's arm, trying to shield her, but the officers reminded her that interfering would only make things worse. Slowly, Mia stepped out onto the porch, still smirking as if she were untouchable. "This is not a joke, young lady," the female officer said firmly. "You destroyed someone else's property. You are coming with us." Gasps spread through the neighbors. Some even whispered in relief. For the first time, Mia's smirk faded. She glanced at her mother, expecting her to stop the officers, but even Linda could not prevent what was happening. The law had spoken. They placed Mia in the patrol car, explaining she would be taken for questioning and could face charges. Linda screamed at Tom from across the street, blaming him, accusing him of ruining her family. But her words sounded weak compared to the flashing lights and the clear evidence. When the patrol car drove away, the street fell silent. Neighbors lingered in small groups, talking about what they had just witnessed. Some shook their heads, saying it had been a long time coming. Others expressed relief that justice was finally being served. Tom stood quietly, feeling a mix of emotions. He had not wanted things to reach this point. He only wanted peace and respect. But he also knew this was necessary. Mia had crossed every boundary, and Linda had encouraged her at every step. Without consequences, they would never stop. That night, Tom sat on his porch long after the police cars had left. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silver glow over the quiet street. For the first time in weeks, he felt a small sense of calm. His ATV was damaged, but justice had begun to move. Across the street, Linda sat alone in her living room. The house felt empty without Mia's laughter and arrogance filling it. She replayed the scene again and again in her mind. Anger burned inside her, but beneath that anger was something she refused to admit: fear. Her daughter was no longer untouchable. The neighborhood knew the truth now. The police had acted, and the story of Linda and Mia's arrogance was far from finished. The courtroom was quiet, and everyone waited for the judge to speak. Tom sat in the back row, his hands folded, his eyes steady. He had never asked for trouble, and he never wanted to be in court. But life had pulled him into this battle. Linda sat on one side of the room, her arms crossed, her face stiff with anger. Mia sat beside her, wearing a pale expression, her head slightly down, not as proud as before. The judge looked at the papers in front of him, then at Mia. He spoke in a calm but firm voice. He explained that stealing was a crime, no matter who the person was or how much power they believed they had. He said no one was above the law, not in this neighborhood, not anywhere. Mia shifted uncomfortably. She had spent weeks pretending to be untouchable, but now she could feel the weight of her choices pressing down. Linda tried to defend her daughter. She stood and began to speak, telling the judge that Tom had been unfair, that he should have forgiven Mia because she was young. But the judge raised his hand and reminded her that forgiveness was different from justice. Tom had already forgiven in his heart, but the law still required accountability. The sentence was simple but clear. Mia would spend time in a local detention facility and also serve community service hours after her release. She would also need to attend counseling to learn respect and responsibility. The room fell silent again as everyone absorbed the words. Linda gasped. She turned to her daughter and whispered angrily, but Mia did not answer. She knew deep inside that this time she could not escape. After the session ended, people left the courtroom in small groups, whispering about what they had seen. Some neighbors who had come to watch gave Tom nods of respect. They knew it had been difficult for him, but he had stood strong. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining brightly, and Tom took a deep breath. His friend Mark stood beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing," Mark said. Tom nodded. "I only wanted peace," he replied. Weeks later, life in the neighborhood began to return to normal. Without Mia's loud presence on the streets, things were calmer. People no longer worried about sudden trouble. Children rode their bikes freely, and families enjoyed their evenings without drama. Tom returned to his garage, working on small repairs, sometimes polishing his ATV. The red paint gleamed under the sunlight, a symbol of resilience and patience. One day, while Tom was washing the ATV, a neighbor named Lisa stopped by. She said the neighborhood felt safer now. She also thanked him for standing up, because it showed others that no one had to live in fear of being bullied. Tom smiled politely and said he only wanted fairness, nothing more. Months passed, and Mia returned home after serving her sentence. She was quieter than before. Her old friends no longer came around, and she often kept to herself. At first, she avoided Tom, ashamed to face him. But one morning, as Tom was fixing a fence near his driveway, Mia slowly walked toward him. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "I am sorry," she said softly. Her voice did not carry arrogance this time. Tom looked at her carefully. He saw that her eyes had lost the pride they once held. "I hope you learned something," Tom replied. She nodded. "Yes, I thought I could do anything I wanted, but I was wrong." Tom accepted her apology with a small nod. He did not smile, but his tone was calm. "Life gives us lessons. It depends on us if we change or not." Mia thanked him and walked away. It was not friendship, but it was a small step toward change. As for Linda, she continued to complain about small matters in the neighborhood, but her voice carried less power now. Many neighbors had lost respect for her after the trial. The homeowners association also began to question her constant interference. Eventually, she stepped down from her position in the HOA because people no longer supported her. The balance in the neighborhood slowly returned. People realized that no matter how loud or powerful someone appeared, the truth always came forward. Tom became a quiet example of how patience and determination could bring justice without shouting, without fighting, only with persistence. One summer evening, Tom drove his ATV down the trail by the woods. The air was warm and the sky was painted with orange and gold colors. As he rode, he thought about everything that had happened. It had been a long and difficult road, but in the end, truth had won. He stopped at the top of a hill, looked over the trees, and felt peace. He realized that life was never about avoiding challenges, but about facing them with strength and fairness. He smiled to himself, started the engine again, and drove forward into the fading light. The story of the spoiled HOA Karen's daughter, who believed she was untouchable, had finally come to an end. The neighborhood had learned that respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned. And for Tom, it was not just about protecting an ATV. It was about protecting the peace and values of the place he called home.